welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast. You asked, we've delivered. A lot of people have been asking to hear from someone who works in the development and scouting departments of academy football in the Championship or the Premier League. And Glenn, who works in the development centre at QPR, has been kind enough to give us a bit of insight into how these departments operate and, how clubs you might take it away and learn a bit about maybe how Spurs operate in this area from this. But it's going to be really interesting. So, Glenn, you mentioned you worked in the development centre. Did you want to kind of expand on exactly what that means?
Yeah, so my main role really is to oversee the players that come into QPR, manage the coaches that work for the development centre, organise games programmes, deal with retain and releases of players that do come in, and then also players that are of interest we would push forward to trial with our academy groups.
Thanks. And just before we go forward as well, I want to clarify, Glenn is named after Glenn Hoddle and is a huge Spurs fan. Thought that was quite important for a Spurs podcast to know we're talking to one of us.
Yeah,
as it were.
yeah. My dad was a massive Spurs fan and watched Tottenham in the 80s and watched Glenn Hoddle, and the rest was history. There was no other name. If it's a boy, it's going to be Glenn. I don't know if it was a girl, it was going to be Glenda, but no, Glenn it is. So, yeah.
Very good, very good. Well, can we start a bit with about kind of like how you would focus your time in a development centre academy football? Is it all about trying to find the next talent? Are you all out and about scouting kind of all the other, players around the country? Do you go overseas? Like, how does this all kind of work?
In terms of youth recruitment, obviously there's rules and regulations. For ourselves, we can only recommend players, so for primary school ages, which would be 6 to 11, they have to live within 1 hour of our training grounds, travelling time. And then for secondary schools, they have to live 1 hour and a half. But then if you're a club like Spurs, you still have to look for players within that time. But what you can do is you could relocate those players on a full-time education programme. They have, because they're a category 1 and we're a category 2, they have a little bit more pull in terms of players they can identify. And when the players get slightly older, they would probably look further afield. But for ourselves, 16s down, it is pretty much those rules. 1 hour for primary school and then an hour and a half for secondary school.
That's interesting because I've seen before when, let's just say Liverpool, there was an example recently where someone took a picture of all, because they've done really well with progressing young players through into their first team, but some people said, hey, wait a second, a lot of these players aren't actually originally from their catchment area.
Yeah. So Harvey Elliott was at QPR originally and then went to Fulham, and then from Fulham was bought by Liverpool. So there's an example there.
I see.
So I think we had Harvey up to about under 11s, under 12s. And then he went to Fulham.
So once they hit that age of finishing that education period, they can be moved, or do they have to be moved into?
So there would be compensation involved. It would all depend on each individual. But if it was a player that we had and we trained them from a certain age to whatever age they leave, each year they're at the club would build the compensation that would be due to that club. It kind of stops the bigger clubs from just taking any player they like. Most players would come with a compensation fee.
Got it. But I assume if a club was to come in that had infinite amounts of money and was owned by a state or whatever, like those compensation fees, they're not going to prevent it always happening, but they are still helpful.
No.
Helpful
and
way.
Obviously, it all depends on the player and his family and whether they want to go as well. Sometimes there's no point keeping a player at your club and they don't want to be there, because it is what it is, really. It's the kids at the end of the day, and wherever they want to play their football, they want to play it.
But it must be pretty hard to identify the criteria of what a successful player is going to be like in these young ages, because bodies grow at different times in your life. Yeah. Like, how do you try and pick out the diamonds?
I think the younger the player is, obviously there's more scope for improvement. I think speed is, obviously, as the professional game is so quick now, I think speed is a very big thing, but then you can always play devil's advocate. If you looked at Harry Kane when he was 11, he obviously got released at Arsenal. If you look at the pictures of him in the Arsenal shirt, he's not the specimen he is now. So, players can come back around and prove you wrong. But I think younger ages, we try to look for things that they do with the ball, so like where almost wow moments. So going past a player or trying to find that pass, even if they can't make that pass, but they've looked up and you can see their intention. and things like that. That would be in our pre-academy. You're looking just for little snippets, but then obviously as the players get older, it is more refined as in terms of what you're looking for.
And how much is data driven versus eye test driven at that age bracket?
I would say a grassroots football, you're competing with lots of other clubs. So you've got ourselves being a Cat 2 academy, and we're dealing with Tottenham, Chelsea, Arsenal, all of these clubs. We just have to sometimes be quicker than them to identify the players.
And is it like where you get to know, like, is it like where you get to know, your peers at other clubs a little bit, where you're like, oh, there's John and Alice from Spurs over there, and they must be after someone else I'm looking at.
Yeah, so sometimes you know them, and you're friends as such. You're all looking like for the best player on that pitch. The biggest time you see them will be sort of now the summer tournaments, and they'll all be watching the under sixes, because that's the sort of
under six level. Wow,
that's the youngest that they come in, but that's almost the untapped market, because they've watched those players when they're under nines, under tens, 3 or 4 years, so they'll know all the best players at those ages. But they're still going to have a look. But you'll see. And they all go in kit because they want people to know they're there. So yeah, it's a race to the bottom sometimes.
Wow. So I guess that's the way of staying ahead, is people are going, well, if I can identify someone before they turn 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, and they're going to get ahead and ahead.
Well, before you know it, we'll be in the maternity wards checking the ultrasounds. So I'm joking.
You never know.
We're not doing that yet.
With the way AI is going, we never know. They'll be testing genes of parents before their children are born and signing them on free contracts.
You say that, but there is things that we would look. So when you look at parents per se, you can almost tell what height that player is going to be, because they'll always be taller than their mum, so that they're never going to be any smaller than their mum. So if the mum's 6'1", then that player's going to be essentially taller than his mum.
Wow, this is fascinating. I can't believe the levels that it goes into. So tell us then, if we've got children and they're listening, what age for Project Cane does their child need to be kind of making some signals that they've got talent to increase their chances of getting picked up?
Do you know what? You would be surprised. So some of the sixes, the ones that are identified as having talent, they're allowed up to under nines. They're allowed to train at any club they like, because they can't officially sign until under nines. So little Johnny may be training on a Monday at Chelsea, Tuesday at Fulham, Wednesday at Arsenal, Thursday at Tottenham, Friday at QPR. There's also a London centre for Southampton. So the best players, and they will train 3 or 4 places like a week at 6 or 7.
Incredible. And at that age, I mean, all your negotiations are obviously going to be with their family member or their guardian that looks after that individual,
right? 16, you'd never really have much interaction with the player themselves. All of your dealings due to safeguarding would be with their responsible adult.
Well, okay. Well, I won't ask too much on that, but I'd imagine it's a bit like when you're trying to kind of go through the education system with a child and the teacher relationship. There's lots of varying parenting styles, shall we say, and beliefs in. I think my son's the greatest son on earth, and if he was in that shoes, I'd be thinking, how can you not be looking at this guy? And I imagine you do get a lot of that.
Yeah, well, a lot of parents will chase the badge rather than what's best for their child. Sometimes we can only tell them so much, but if you have a family and you have other siblings and you're going X, Y, and Z 3 times a week, you may be having to take that child in the car. They're having their dinner in the car, doing their homework on the way to training, whereas they may live 5 minutes from where we are. So what works better? The ball is round, the grass is green, wherever they play football. It just depends what they feel is better for their child, really. We can only give them so much, and then it's ultimately down to the parent.
Wow.
But we've had players come in at under 8, and we've said, look, we would like to offer you for the under 9 season. They decide that they don't want to sign for us and go and sign at Chelsea, say. By 10 or 11, they may come back out and have been released, and then they're looking for another club again. So sometimes players come back around, and you may remember that player from 8 and go, oh yeah, let's take a look at them now.
Yeah, and I'm imagining you've got plenty of examples of players you probably thought, I'm not sure about them at this age, and then suddenly in 3 years you're going, wow, that was an opportunity we could have grabbed, and vice versa.
Yes. Sometimes that you have to have a little bit of luck, right time, right place, sort of thing. We had I'm trying to think of an example. Well, we had Phoenix Afire, Martin Afire's son, as an under 12 at QPR. He come in on trial, similar to his dad, very very quick. Probably a little bit raw at that age. He's now, I think, so he's under 16 now, and he's signed at Tottenham.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so he hopefully, like, really nice kid. Dad's great, mum's great, good family. Brother plays, I believe, rugby professionally as well. He's maybe 21, 22, something like that now. So yeah, hopefully, lucky for Spurs, hopefully he comes through and makes the first team.
And do you think it's an advantage when you've got I know everyone's individual, but I mean, on average, would you say it's an advantage when the parents have come from professional sporting backgrounds and kind of know the journey and what it...
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that obviously they can have that guidance because they've been through it themselves, I suppose. They'll understand, I think, understanding rejection and things like that sometimes. Dealing with an elite environment, I think they can give them that sort of help, but ultimately it will always be down to the player, and it has to be their attitude and their desire, really.
Yeah. And so when you're kind of setting out your plans and looking for the types of players you're looking for, is there a relation between, let's just say like a club like Spurs, right? I have a director of football, and they'll be setting some kind of vision. We don't have to go into details of what that is at QPR, but does that vision of like what the hierarchy want translate into the academy scouting? So you might be told, look, we'd love to find players of certain profiles here as a priority for the coming seasons. Can you focus on that?
So we would have like a certain position. We would look for, there has to be certain attributes for a number 9, say. So there would be certain bits that we would have listed as a guideline of what we're looking when we're going out for players. Obviously, if we're looking for under 8, there will be a guideline, but they're not going to be something that like the manager's looking for now. So it has to obviously be, when they're at 16, there would be a lot more information. It will be sort of basic down for when they're slightly younger. Yeah.
Yeah. And talking of like players and them progressing their careers, you must have seen many of the players you have worked with go on to men's football at various levels. What's your view? QPR hat off a second, just looking at Spurs for a second. Like, one of the key topics, interested to get your thoughts on this, is the likes of Mikey Moore, like really young guy, teenager. There was a lot of fans kind of saying, he should be playing week in, week out. Like, what do you make of, like, there's 2 questions here. One is, do you think there's a significant step between if a player's doing really well in youth football and academy football, does that translate to them being ready for the men's team? Or is it very different and you think sometimes, there needs to be a bit more patience? What do you think about the kind of leap?
I think, so with Mikey this season, I think the sporting game where he had was it the half? He had an unbelievable sort of 45 minutes, and everyone was singing his praises. And he's going to be the next this, next that. Needs to play every week, and then obviously the exposure he's getting in and around the first team, amazing. I don't think you can replicate that. And the learning environment he's in with some of them players, obviously full internationals and whatnot. So that alone is great. And then obviously I think he was quite unlucky because he got an injury and that probably set him back slightly. And then he's come back from injury, and I think it's a case of, well, we don't want to push him too much again, and then he breaks down. So I think it's just remembering his age, not too much too soon. But then you've also got someone like Harry Kane that obviously went on various loan moves, which worked for him. So I think the biggest thing would be every player's different, and it's, some will go in and just thrive, and all of a sudden, like a Wayne Rooney obviously went in and just hit the ground running. And was unbelievable from the start. Other players may take time. I just think it's hard for managers to get it right. You put him in and then he has a terrible game and he's 17 and you've ruined his confidence. But
Mm.
no, he's rubbish. He can't play. I sometimes think fans just need to sort of just slow down a little bit and just sort of
Well,
hopefully understand what they're trying to do is right for that player.
I assume you'll see it around QPR as an example. I imagine sometimes the fan sentiment of what they think's best isn't based on actually understanding the personality of the individual. Some things you'll know about that player behind the scenes. Maybe it's to
Yeah,
do with their fitness or whatever. And therefore, they might not fully understand the decisions being made, even though they're the right ones. And then as a result,
yeah.
they put
Well, I
pressure
think
on.
no one would know that player better than the club. The club have seen that player since he was set. I think Mikey Moore come in when he was about 7 years of age. So
Yeah.
he's been at the club for 10 years. So they will know every niggling injury he's had throughout that time, what he likes, what he doesn't like. They'll have player liaisons. No one will know that player any better than the club themselves. And the fans obviously will watch a game and say, oh, it was unbelievable. But sometimes it just takes time.
And on the player liaison thing, is that a role that's becoming more and more prevalent in football at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think first team level, definitely. Then you'll have sort of academy level, you'll have like head of education, you'll have safeguarding officers and bits and pieces like that. So, but yeah, first team, yeah, definitely.
One more question then, Glenn. When you're working with families and children that age, how much of it for an under 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that kind of age group, like, is about them just loving football? Because I imagine some kids might have all the talent in the world, but they're children. They might just
Yeah,
not. They just might just not be their thing, and the parents might be going, "Oh my!" It must be so frustrating for parents sometimes. I know from a very selfish perspective, as a parent, I can imagine if I turned up to watch my son play a game and Tottenham's head scout for development was there, and they said, "I'm here to watch Jack, your son, Jim. He's got all the talent in the world." And Jack gets home and goes, "Dad, I hate football. Really don't want to play it." Like, how much is it just the kids wanting to play versus talent?
so we obviously have players coming out under six, and I think the biggest thing in them sessions is make them fun, because if they're not, the under kids at under six have their attention span is very limited. So if they find it boring, they just won't engage. I think all players are slightly different. Some will come in and they have lots of confidence and they want to show you what they can do. Others might be very shy. So we may just let some of them come in and just take the ball and just do what you want on the side. And when you're ready to come in and show us what you want to do. Sometimes with the parents, obviously they can be pushy because they might be living their dream through that and you just got to let kids be kids and let them enjoy it. I think that's why officially players won't sign until under 9,
Mhm.
because they have that, not that they have loads of maturity at 9, but they have a little bit more than what they do at 6. So yeah, I think it's very important that the kids enjoy football. The industry we're in, obviously, it's very hard to deviate between the two, because we are looking for the best players. We can only sign so many in each age group, and it is part of it is dealing with that rejection, and obviously we never speak to the player themselves. A lot of the time the feedback would be to the parent, for them to then sort of discuss with the child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a fascinating story, isn't there, about Poch when he was first picked up as a kid, as a talented prospect. He said they I forget which club it was, his first team, but he said they came over and they were all he hear the murmuring downstairs, and whoever the coach was of that team came up, lifted up the duvet and looked at his legs and said, "Yeah, footballer's legs," and that was enough for him to get his opportunity to have a go in their academy. But it really is a game of, I guess, by the sounds of it, it's just there's no perfect strategy. There is methods, and you just got to kind of work your way through it and always remain open-minded that someone may not be it at 6, but they might make it at 12, vice versa.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
loads of variances.
Yeah, I sometimes think as well, like we may release a player at a certain age, and that may sometimes be the rejection may just spur them on. They may say, "Well, actually, do you know what? I want to prove them wrong. I
Yeah.
want to go away." You look at obviously lots of stories where players have been released at say 16. Jamie Vardy is obviously the one everyone talks about. Got released at Sheffield Wednesday at 16. Went to I think Stockbridge Steels or somewhere like that. Went and played men's football non-league and just went from strength to strength to strength, and then obviously scored however many goals in the Premier League now. I think was it 200 now, has he just reached or something like
Mm-hmm.
that? But
Yeah.
yeah, just when I think he got released at 16 because he was too small, and now obviously very quick and direct and can finish, and he's won the Premier League, which he likes to remind us ever so often.
Yeah. Well, there's other examples. Famously, Messi was told he was too small.
Yeah.
I mean, Harry Kane into battle. He was released by Arsenal's academy. If you'd have said to any Spurs fan in his debut season playing in the Premier League, you can all whack 100 quid on, and I'll give you 200 back if this guy makes it. No one would have taken the offer. No one thought he was going to make it. And then it was a one-season wonder. And then
but
he
Daniel
just
Levy
kept
wanted to
battling.
sell him. Daniel Levy wanted to sell him, and I believe Tim Sherwood said, I think the price was 100,000. And I think Tim Sherwood has come out and quoted, he's eaten more than that in the time he's been here. So it's not worth selling him for that. But yeah. I mean, I think players definitely develop at different ages. I think the biggest thing is sometimes we are looking at the here and now, and we don't have crystal balls. We may sign a player at 9. It doesn't mean they're going to be our best player at 16. Kids go through a hell of a lot when they're growing up. They obviously change schools. There's lots of stuff that happens outside of what happens at the club. So yeah, there's so much that goes on before they actually make it as professionals.
Yeah. Well, look, and this has been super interesting, and thanks for giving us an insight into what it's like in such a competitive world, particularly when you've got managing part of a academy in London, I imagine, where you have the wealth of those, the Arsenals, the Tottenhams, the Chelseas, swooping around, huge clubs like QPR as well as competition. It must be a real battleground at times. But and congratulations again on the under-21s cup win. That's phenomenal. So congrats.
It was a proud moment. I got to go on the pitch and celebrate with the players after. Not something I do very often, but a lot of those players have been at the club since they was sort of 7 and 8, and I still see them as 7 and 8 year olds sometimes. So very good for them, and proud night that was.
Well, I won't make you answer this question, but I would love to ask you what you celebrated more, that or Spurs Europa League trophy. But if just in case,
100%. It was Tottenham. 17 years without a trophy. It was definitely Tottenham winning Europa League.
Excellent.
And are you Ange in or Ange out?
Well, our show is like the consensus overall is there's more upside in giving him the next 3 or 4 months and giving him the opportunity to show if he can adhere to his promises next season that there will be an improvement in the league. I just think, why go through this much pain, get 60% of the way through a project and pull the plug when in 3 to 6 months you'll know the answer probably for almost certain as to whether we'll be able to, build on what we did last year. What about you, Glenn? What's your thoughts?
I'm very much. I think the league has been difficult. I think the club probably looked and felt, or Ange or the powers that be felt, they probably couldn't get top 4, but they could still get in the Champions League by focusing on the Europa League, which I think they did definitely. We've got Champions League football. If you'd have said that we'd have got that and we'd have won a trophy at the start of the season, I think a lot of fans would have took that. I'm definitely Ange in. I'd like to see some improvement on the personnel in the summer, because I think the second squad that played in the league clearly wasn't good enough. So I would like there to be some slight improvements. Now that we've got Champions League, I think we can identify players that would come to us because they may not have if we didn't have Champions League. Obviously, the stadium, the facilities and everything else sells the club itself. So hopefully it changes next year and Ange has a better season. We did say the Series 3 is better than Series 2. So fingers crossed.
Exactly. When we first appointed him, we all got really excited because we had someone who had worked for Celtic explain about him. And we were like, oh my gosh, like the way this man can change cultures, install a winning mentality. We've got to give this guy the opportunity. We've been sticking with him through the most doldrummy periods when everyone's been telling us we're crazy. We're like, no, stick with him. He can do this.
I think he was very unlucky with injuries last season.
He was,
some people argue whether it's the way we play, high lines and players pulling hamstrings because they're having to track back Van der Ven. So I think he was unlucky with injuries. If he'd have had his strongest side for the start of the league and when it, through Christmas and whatnot, it might have been a different story. I did see something online where there was so many players missing throughout the season, and to come away with a trophy after that, I think he did do well in the end. 22 losses in the end is not doing well. winning a trophy is not easy, and obviously for 17 years we haven't been able to do that.
Well, as well, like we were saying, that people kept going, oh, we still should be doing much better with Forster, Gray, and Davies at the back. And I'm kind of like, but I don't think Forster, Gray, and Davies are centre backs, because they're wonderful players, and Archie Gray is a wonderful talent, but he is by no means a centre back.
No,
He does not start in the top half side as a centre back, but
no.
he was our centre back for a long time.
And again, he's only 18,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
he's got so much developing to do, and
Yeah.
so he's a player that is a year older than Mikey, and he's played that many minutes in that many
Yeah.
different positions, and I think people forget that sometimes.
They do.
So you see where him and Bergvall are at when they're 22, 23. If they're still at the club, they will be, because of the experiences they've had now, they will be unbelievable. Whether that will be under Ange, I don't know, but if we're backing these youngsters to come through and give them the opportunities, I hope the future's bright at Tom.
Yeah, well, it's great to see us focusing more on the youth football, and particularly with the importance right now we're in the UEFA Champions League. You've got the club-grown and homegrown quotas that Spurs haven't managed well over the last 6 or 7 years, so they lack Champions League level players in those spots. So that's the importance of getting your academy right. You've got to fill those club-grown spots with good players. So yeah, it's really important. But thanks. Oh, my camera's just gone there, just in the worst possible moment. But thanks so much for joining us, Glenn. And yeah, up the Spurs.
Up the Spurs. No worries, Jim. You're more than welcome.
You sick podcasts and football shows that are just a bunch of people spouting opinions with no substance. It's always toxic negativity. It's toxic positivity. There's no substance. You don't come out of it feeling like you've learned anything new. Well, that's why we created Oh So Spurs. It's the Thinking Fans podcast. I'm Jim, and I'm the host. But I am only a sum of many brilliant parts. We have A-licensed coaches like JJ to help us dissect how games changed and how coaches are adapting. We have people who work in finance to tell us how much can Spurs actually spend and why we don't leave it all down to opinions when we discuss these things. We always look for the facts. We go and search long and hard to find people who've actually worked at Spurs. We talk to ex-coaches from Tottenham. We talk to ex-coaches from players we've recently signed to get you a deeper level look into them than you're going to get on a typical show on the internet. But we depend on our members to get this kind of content. To raise the bar and provide you with higher quality content, we need to find a revenue stream that is sustainable for us. And that is where you come in as members. You are the lifeblood of our show. We all do this for free as members of the show, and we need the money to survive and keep it running. So if you would like to be a member, we will promise you back an extra 2 videos per week as a minimum, and first access to our daily videos that come out as well, alongside other things like access to our WhatsApp groups, where you will find those 8 licensed coaches and those finance experts and the rest of the panel to have a chat to about Spurs. So welcome to the show, and I hope you get all you're looking for and you like to stick around. Up the Spurs.